Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls in her small Texas town. While her classmates painted their nails and talked about boys, she was cleaning her grandfather's hunting rifles and practicing target shooting in the backyard. Her father, a Marine veteran, had taught her that discipline and precision were more valuable than any jewelry or makeup. At 18, Sarah stood 5 feet 6 inches tall with calloused hands and steady eyes that never wavered when she looked at you. Her high school guidance counselor had suggested she consider nursing or teaching, but Sarah had other plans. She wanted to join the Navy SEALs even though everyone told her it was impossible. The year was 2018, and women had only recently been allowed to attempt SEAL training. The policy had changed, but the attitudes hadn't. When Sarah walked into the Navy recruitment office in Houston, the sergeant behind the desk looked her up and down with barely concealed skepticism. "You sure about this, sweetheart?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "SEAL training isn't like those action movies. It's the hardest military training in the world. Most men don't make it through the first week." Sarah placed her hands flat on his desk and leaned forward slightly. "I'm not most men," she replied calmly. "I'm here to serve my country at the highest level possible. Are you going to help me do that, or should I find someone who will?" The sergeant's eyebrows shot up. He'd expected her to back down, maybe get emotional or defensive. Instead, she'd responded with quiet confidence that made him reconsider his initial assessment. He pulled out the paperwork and began explaining the process. The road to SEAL training was long and demanding. Sarah first had to complete basic Navy training, then advanced combat training, then qualify for special operations. Each step eliminated more candidates. Each step Sarah excelled. During basic training at Great Lakes Naval Base, Sarah's drill instructors tried to break her down like they did with everyone else. They screamed in her face, made her do extra push-ups, and questioned her commitment. But Sarah had been preparing for this her entire life. While her bunkmates cried themselves to sleep, Sarah cleaned her equipment and studied her manuals. "Martinez!" Petty Officer Jackson would yell during morning exercises. "Drop and give me 50. Let's see if you can keep up with the boys." Sarah would drop immediately and bang out 50 perfect push-ups while maintaining eye contact with the instructor. She never complained, never made excuses, never showed weakness. The other recruits began to respect her quiet determination, and even the instructors started to nod approvingly when they thought she wasn't looking. Her marksmanship scores were exceptional. On the shooting range, Sarah consistently outperformed 90% of her male counterparts. Her groupings were tight, her stance was perfect, and her breathing control was textbook. The range instructor, a grizzled veteran named Chief Martinez, no relation, pulled her aside after one particularly impressive session. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" he asked. "My grandfather," Sarah replied. "He was a sniper in Vietnam. Started teaching me when I was 8. Chief Martinez nodded slowly. "He taught you well. Keep this up and you might actually have a shot at special operations." As Sarah progressed through her training, word began to spread about the young woman, who was outshining many of the male recruits. Some viewed her success with admiration, others with suspicion. There were whispers in the barracks that she was getting special treatment, that the standards were being lowered for her benefit. Sarah ignored the gossip and focused on her performance. The physical fitness tests were where many expected her to struggle. The Navy's fitness standards for women were different from those for men, but Sarah wasn't interested in meeting the women's standards. She trained to exceed the men's requirements in every category. When test day arrived, she cranked out more pull-ups than 3/4 of her male classmates and ran her 2-mile time fast enough to max out the men's scoring chart. Her swimming abilities were equally impressive. Growing up near the Gulf Coast, Sarah had been swimming since she was 4 years old. In the pool, she moved through the water like she belonged there, her strokes efficient and powerful. During underwater training, while other recruits struggled to hold their breath, Sarah remained calm and focused, sometimes staying submerged so long that instructors had to check to make sure she was okay. But it wasn't just her physical abilities that set Sarah apart. She had an analytical mind that broke down complex problems into manageable components. During tactical training exercises, she would study the scenarios carefully, identify the optimal approaches, and execute with precision. Her instructors began using her solutions as examples for other recruits. The psychological evaluations were another hurdle. Military psychologists probed for weaknesses, testing mental resilience and decision-making under pressure. They asked about her motivations, her family background, her fears and doubts. Sarah answered honestly but never revealed uncertainty about her chosen path. "Why do you want to be a SEAL?" the psychologist asked during one session. "Because it's the best," Sarah replied simply. "I want to serve my country at the highest level possible. I want to be part of something that matters, something that makes a difference in the world. And if you don't make it through training?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Then I'll know I gave everything I had to give, but I plan to make it through." As her basic training neared completion, Sarah's commanding officers faced a decision. Her scores were outstanding across the board. Her leadership potential was evident. Her determination was unwavering. By every measurable standard, she had earned the right to attempt SEAL training, but they also knew what awaited her at basic underwater demolition SEAL training in Coronado, California. Bud S. was a meat grinder that chewed up and spit out even the most prepared candidates. The instructors there were legendary for their ability to find and exploit any weakness. The physical demands were crushing, the mental pressure relentless, and the dropout rate astronomical. No woman had ever successfully completed SEAL training. Several had tried, but all had been eliminated during the grueling 6-month process. The instructors at Bud S. weren't necessarily opposed to women joining their ranks, but they weren't going to lower their standards either. If Sarah wanted to earn the SEAL Trident, she would have to prove herself capable of the same impossible standards that had broken thousands of men before her. Sarah's orders came through on a Tuesday morning. She was being sent to Naval Special Warfare Preparatory School, the final step before BUDS itself. As she packed her gear, she thought about her grandfather's words from years earlier. "Precision and discipline, Sarah. Master those two things, and you can accomplish anything." She had no idea that those words would soon be tested in ways she couldn't imagine. The California sun was already blazing at 6 in the morning when Sarah stepped off the bus at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly to the west, its waves crashing against the shore with a rhythm that would soon become the soundtrack to either her greatest triumph or her most crushing defeat. Bud S. Class 384 was assembling on the beach, and Sarah immediately felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon her. She was the only woman among 143 candidates, a fact that made her stand out like a lighthouse beacon. The men around her ranged from college athletes to former Marines, from farm boys to city kids, but they all shared one thing in common. They thought they knew what they were in for. They were wrong. Instructor Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez stepped onto a wooden platform overlooking the assembled candidates. His voice carried easily over the sound of the waves as he began the speech that would either inspire them or terrify them into quitting on the spot. "Welcome to the most miserable 6 months of your lives," Rodriguez announced, his eyes scanning the crowd. "Look to your left. Look to your right. Statistics say that only 20 of you will be standing here at graduation. The rest of you will ring that bell over there and return to whatever comfortable life you came from." Sarah followed his gesture to a brass bell mounted on a post near the training compound. 3 times. That's all it would take. Ring the bell. 3 times and the pain would stop. The humiliation would end. The impossible would remain impossible. "Some of you think you're here because you're tough," Rodriguez continued. "Some of you think you're here because you're smart. Some of you," his eyes found Sarah in the crowd, "think you're here to prove a point. Let me be clear about something. We don't care about your politics, your gender, your background, or your feelings. We care about one thing only. Can you operate when everything goes wrong? Can you perform when you're cold, tired, hungry, and scared? Can you be counted on when lives depend on your actions?" The first weeks of BUDS were designed to separate the dreamers from the warriors. Physical training began before dawn and continued until well after sunset. Sarah found herself carrying telephone poles on the beach, doing countless push-ups in the surf and running miles through soft sand that seemed designed to swallow her legs. The other candidates' reactions to her presence varied dramatically. Some, like Tommy Chen from San Francisco, treated her as just another teammate struggling through the same hell. Others, like Jake Morrison from Alabama, made it clear through sideways glances and muttered comments that they believed she didn't belong there. "She's gonna get someone killed," Morrison whispered to his bunkmate one evening as they cleaned their equipment. "This isn't about equal rights. This is about life and death situations where you need people who can carry their weight." Reno heard the comment but chose not to respond. She'd learned long ago that her actions would speak louder than any words she could offer. Instead, she focused on her performance, pushing herself to exceed every standard, to outlast every doubt. The log PT sessions were particularly brutal. Teams of 6 candidates had to work together to carry, lift, and maneuver telephone poles through various exercises. Sarah's team initially struggled with coordination, partly because some members weren't sure how to work with her effectively. During one session, as they attempted to carry their log overhead during lunges, the team began to falter. "Come on, Martinez," shouted Bobby Rodriguez from the team's front position. "We need more from the back." Sarah was already pushing with everything she had, her shoulders burning from the weight, but she dug deeper. As the team started to collapse, she shifted her position slightly, took more of the load, and helped stabilize the entire group. They completed the exercise, but Sarah's hands were bleeding from the rough bark. That evening, Bobby approached her as she bandaged her palms. "Hey," he said quietly. "I'm sorry about earlier. I didn't realize you were carrying more weight than any of us." Sarah looked up from her medical tape. "We're all carrying what we need to carry," she replied. "That's what makes us a team." The academic portions of training were where Sarah's analytical mind truly shined. Combat diving, navigation, weapons systems, and tactical planning came naturally to her. While other candidates struggled with the mathematical calculations required for underwater navigation or the complex procedures for handling explosives, Sarah absorbed the information like a sponge. During one particularly challenging navigation exercise, teams were given coordinates and had to plot courses using only compass and map. Many teams became lost in the coastal hills, wandering for hours before finding their objectives. Sarah's team reached their target in record time, largely due to her precise calculations and methodical approach to route planning. Instructor Rodriguez pulled her aside after the exercise. "Where'd you learn navigation like that?" "My grandfather taught me to hunt," Sarah explained. "He always said that knowing exactly where you are and where you're going is the difference between success and failure. I've been reading maps and using compasses since I was 10. Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. "Keep doing what you're doing, Martinez. Some of the other instructors are watching you closely." Sarah understood the implication. There were people hoping she would fail, looking for any excuse to eliminate her from the program. She would have to be perfect in every aspect of training, not just competitive. The pool exercises were among the most feared events in Bud S. Pool comp involved swimming underwater while instructors attempted to drown candidates by removing their masks, turning off their air supply, and tying their equipment in knots. The exercise was designed to simulate combat diving emergencies and test mental toughness under extreme stress. Sarah's first pool comp session was a disaster. As she swam, underwater with her diving equipment, Instructor Williams suddenly appeared behind her and shut off her air supply. Panic began to creep into her mind as her lungs started burning. When Williams then ripped off her mask and tangled her air hoses, Sarah made a critical error. She tried to surface. "Martinez, get back down there," Williams shouted as Sarah's head broke the surface. "You surface before completing the exercise, you fail." Sarah dove back down, her heart racing and her confidence shaken. She spent the next 20 minutes underwater, methodically untangling her equipment while fighting the urge to breathe. When she finally completed the exercise and surfaced properly, she was physically and emotionally drained. That night, she called her grandfather from a payphone outside the barracks. "I almost quit today," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Her grandfather was quiet for a long moment. "But you didn't," he finally said. "That's what matters. Every warrior faces moments when they want to quit. The difference between a warrior and everyone else is what they do in that moment." "What if I'm not strong enough?" Sarah asked. What if they're right and I don't belong here? Strength isn't about never being afraid or never wanting to quit, her grandfather replied. Strength is about doing what needs to be done despite being afraid, despite wanting to quit. You've got that strength, Sarah. I've seen it since you were a little girl. Trust yourself. The conversation gave Sarah the mental reset she needed. The next morning, she was back in the pool, ready to face whatever the instructors could throw at her. This time, when they shut off her air and tangled her equipment, she remained calm and methodical. She completed the exercise flawlessly The weeks passed. Sarah's reputation among her classmates began to shift. Her consistent performance, her willingness to help struggling teammates, and her refusal to complain or make excuses earned grudging respect from even her harshest critics. During one particularly difficult beach run, she stopped to help a struggling candidate who was falling behind, potentially risking her own completion time. "Leave me," gasped Peterson, a former college football player who was struggling with the endurance demands of SEAL training. "Don't let me drag you down." Sarah grabbed his arm and pulled him forward. "We finish together, or we don't finish at all," she said firmly. They completed the run within the required time limit, both of them. That evening, Peterson approached her with tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he said simply. "I won't forget that." But not everyone was warming to Sarah's presence. Some instructors seemed determined to find her breaking point, pushing her harder and longer than the other candidates. During one equipment inspection, Instructor Johnson spent 20 minutes finding microscopic flaws in Sarah's perfectly organized gear while barely glancing at the obviously substandard equipment of other candidates. Sarah endured the harassment without complaint, reorganizing her equipment and presenting it for inspection again and again until Johnson finally moved on. She understood that this was part of the test. They weren't just evaluating her physical capabilities. They were testing her mental resilience, her ability to perform under unfair pressure. As her first phase of Bud-S training neared its end, Sarah had survived longer than many had expected. She'd outlasted candidates who were bigger, stronger, and more experienced. She'd proven that she could handle the physical demands and master the academic requirements. But the real test was just beginning. Hell Week was approaching, and everyone knew that's where most candidates met their breaking point. 168 hours of continuous training with minimal sleep, constant harassment, and physical challenges that pushed human endurance to its absolute limits. Sarah spent her final weekend before Hell Week preparing mentally and physically. She knew that the next week would either make her career or end her dream. Everything she'd worked for, everything she'd sacrificed, would be decided in the next 7 days. Sunday night before Hell Week, Sarah lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling while her classmates tossed and turned around her. Sleep was impossible. Everyone knew that in a few hours their world would transform into something resembling a controlled nightmare designed to break their spirits and test their absolute limits. At exactly midnight, the barracks erupted in chaos. Instructors burst through the doors with air horns, blank ammunition, and shouted commands that made no logical sense. Bright lights flooded the room as candidates scrambled out of their bunks, disoriented and confused. "Move! Move! Move!" screamed Instructor Williams, firing blank rounds from an M60 machine gun. "Get your sorry butts on the beach! This is not a drill! We are under attack!" Sarah's training kicked in automatically. While other candidates stumbled around looking for their boots or trying to figure out what was happening, she was already dressed and moving toward the door. Her grandfather's lessons about staying calm under pressure served her well in those first crucial moments. The beach was illuminated by floodlights and filled with instructors who seemed to have transformed overnight from tough trainers into screaming demons. Smoke machines created an otherworldly atmosphere as candidates were ordered into the surf for the first of what would be countless sessions in the freezing Pacific Ocean. "Welcome to Hell Week," roared Chief Rodriguez, his voice somehow carrying over the chaos of air horns, simulated gunfire, and crashing waves. "For the next 5.5 days, you will discover what you're really made of. Some of you think you're tough. Some of you think you're ready. You're all wrong." The first evolution was surf torture, and it set the tone for everything that would follow. Candidates had to link arms and sit in the surf, allowing the freezing waves to crash over them repeatedly. The Pacific Ocean in December was brutally cold, and within minutes Sarah's entire body was numb. Hypothermia was a real danger, and the medical staff stood ready to pull candidates who showed signs of serious distress. But the psychological impact was even worse than the physical discomfort. Sitting helplessly in the freezing water while instructors screamed insults and threats was designed to break down mental barriers and force candidates to confront their deepest fears. "Martinez!" yelled Instructor Johnson, walking directly up to where Sarah sat shivering in the surf. "You cold yet? Ready to ring that bell and go back to playing dress-up?" Sarah looked up at him with eyes that refused to show weakness. "Negative, instructor," she replied through chattering teeth. "I'm exactly where I need to be." Johnson leaned down closer. "We'll see about that. This is just the beginning." After 45 minutes in the surf, the candidates were ordered out for calisthenics on the beach. Sand stuck to their wet bodies as they performed push-ups, sit-ups, and jumping jacks. The sand worked its way into every piece of equipment, every article of clothing, and every part of their bodies. It would remain there for the entire week, a constant reminder of their suffering. The first meal of Hell Week was served at 300 hours, and it was the last leisurely meal they would have for days. From that point forward, candidates had to eat, while standing, often while being screamed at or forced to perform exercises. Sarah learned to eat mechanically, not tasting the food but simply consuming calories for fuel. Log PT during Hell Week was exponentially more brutal than the regular training sessions. Teams carried telephone poles while running through the surf, across the beach, and up and down sand dunes. When team members began to collapse from exhaustion, the remaining candidates had to carry both the logs and their fallen teammates. Sarah's team started strong, but by Tuesday afternoon, they were down to 4 effective members out of 6. Morrison, who had questioned Sarah's place in training, was struggling with severe leg cramps, and Peterson was showing signs of serious dehydration. The team faced a choice: leave the struggling members behind or risk failing the evolution by trying to help them. Sarah made the decision without hesitation. "We carry everyone," she announced to her remaining teammates. "Nobody gets left behind." For the next 2 hours, Sarah and her teammates carried their log, Morrison, and Peterson through a series of increasingly difficult obstacles. By the end of the evolution, Sarah was bleeding from multiple abrasions, her uniform was torn, and she was running on pure determination. But her team had completed the exercise with all members intact. The lack of sleep was perhaps the most challenging aspect of Hell Week. Candidates were allowed a maximum of 4 hours of sleep over the entire 5-day period, and usually in short intervals that prevented any real rest. By Wednesday, Sarah was experiencing hallucinations, seeing objects and people that weren't there. During one-night evolution, as her team navigated through a series of obstacles in complete darkness, Sarah became convinced that her grandfather was walking beside her, offering encouragement and advice. She knew it wasn't real, but the hallucination was so vivid that she found herself responding to his imagined words. "Stay focused, Sarah," she heard his voice say. "Precision and discipline. Don't let your mind wander." The hallucination actually helped her maintain focus when her exhausted brain wanted to shut down. She used her grandfather's imagined presence as an anchor to reality, a way to keep pushing forward when her body wanted to quit. Thursday brought the dreaded around-the-world evolution, a grueling series of obstacles that pushed candidates to their absolute physical and mental limits. Teams had to navigate through mudflats, crawl under barbed wire, carry boats over their heads, and complete various combat scenarios, while instructors constantly harassed them with noise, smoke, and confusion. Sarah's team was struggling badly by this point. They were down to 3 effective members, and all of them were showing signs of serious physical and mental strain. During one particularly difficult obstacle involving rope climbing while carrying heavy packs, Peterson collapsed completely. "I can't do it," he gasped, lying in the mud beneath the rope climb. "I've got nothing left, just leave me here." Sarah knelt beside him, her own vision blurring from exhaustion. "Yes, you can," she said firmly. "We've come too far to quit now. Let me help you." She managed to half-carry, half-drag Peterson through the remainder of the obstacle course, but the effort cost her dearly. By the time they completed the evolution, Sarah was barely conscious herself. Medical personnel evaluated both candidates, and there was serious discussion about pulling them from training. The bell was ringing constantly by Thursday night. Every few hours, another candidate would decide they'd had enough and ring out of the program. Each time the bell rang, the remaining candidates felt a mixture of relief, one less person to compete against, and fear. Maybe that person was smarter than they were for quitting. Friday morning brought the final major evolution of Hell Week, a long-distance run followed by a series of team challenges that would determine which candidates had truly earned the right to continue in Bud-S training. Sarah's body was operating on pure willpower at this point. She'd lost 15 pounds during the week. Her hands were raw and bleeding, and she was experiencing periodic dizzy spells, but her mind remained focused. As her team prepared for the final run, she gathered her 2 remaining teammates around her. "This is it," she said quietly. "Everything we've been through this week, everything we've sacrificed, comes down to the next few hours. We can do this. We will do this." The final run was along the beach, through the sand dunes and around the naval base. Teams that stayed together and completed the course within the time limit would successfully complete Hell Week. Teams that fell apart or failed to meet the standards would face elimination from the program. Sarah's team started strong, but by the halfway point, both of her teammates were struggling badly. She found herself running between them, offering encouragement, sharing her water, and physically supporting them when they stumbled. Her own body was screaming in protest, but she refused to abandon her team. As they approached the final stretch of the run, Peterson stumbled and fell hard onto the pavement. His ankle was obviously injured, and he couldn't put weight on it. Sarah immediately helped him to his feet and put his arm around her shoulders. "I'm slowing you down," Peterson protested. "Save yourself. You've earned this." Sarah looked at him, with eyes that burned with determination despite her exhaustion. "We finished together," she said simply. "That's what SEALs do." They completed the final run just minutes before the time limit expired, all 3 team members crossing the finish, lined together. Sarah had to be helped to the medical tent afterward, her body finally giving in to the accumulated stress and exhaustion of the week. As she lay on a medical cot receiving IV fluids, Instructor Rodriguez approached her. "How you feeling, Martinez?" he asked. Sarah looked up at him through eyes that were bloodshot and exhausted but still defiant. "Ready for the next evolution, Instructor?" Rodriguez smiled for the first time since Hell Week had begun. "I believe you are." When the final count was taken, only 38 candidates remained out of the original 143 who had started Hell Week. Sarah Martinez was not only still standing, she had emerged as one of the strongest performers in her class, earning respect from instructors and fellow candidates alike. But Hell Week was only the end of the first phase of Bud-S training. 2 more phases awaited, each with its own challenges and opportunities for elimination. The underwater phase would test her diving skills and ability to operate in aquatic environments. The land warfare phase would evaluate her combat skills and tactical thinking. As Sarah recovered from Hell Week, she realized that something fundamental had changed within her. The doubts and fears that had haunted her earlier in training were gone, replaced by an unshakable confidence in her abilities. She had proven to herself and everyone else that she belonged here. But the hardest test was still to come. The second phase of Bud-S training began 3 weeks after Hell Week, giving candidates time to recover physically and mentally from their ordeal. But as Sarah quickly discovered, the instructors had no intention of making things easier. If anything, the standards became higher as the group grew smaller and more elite. Phase 2 focused on diving and underwater operations, skills that would be crucial for any SEAL's career. The training took place both in controlled pool environments and in the open ocean, where conditions were unpredictable and potentially dangerous. Sarah had always been comfortable in the water, but SEAL-level diving was unlike anything she'd experienced before. The first major challenge came during pool competency training, which had been simplified during the initial weeks but now returned with vengeance. Instructors would attack candidates underwater, shutting off their air supply, removing their masks, and tying their equipment in knots while the candidate had to remain calm and solve the problems without surfacing. Sarah's previous struggles with pool comp during first phase had taught her valuable lessons about staying calm under extreme stress. When Instructor Williams approached her underwater during her first second phase session, she was ready. He shut off her air supply and immediately began tying her hoses in complex knots. Instead of panicking, Sarah closed her eyes and methodically worked through the problem. She'd learned that trying to see underwater while being harassed was often counterproductive. Better to rely on muscle memory and systematic problem-solving. She untangled her equipment, restored her air supply, and completed the underwater navigation course without ever attempting to surface. Williams waited for her at the edge of the pool. Better, he admitted grudgingly. Much better. The open ocean exercises were where second phase training became truly challenging. San Diego Bay could be unforgiving, with strong currents, poor visibility, and water temperatures that required careful management of exposure times. Candidates had to complete long-distance underwater swims, navigate to specific coordinates using only compass and counting, and perform complex tasks while dealing with real-world diving conditions. During one particularly difficult exercise, Sarah's dive buddy was Tommy Chen, the candidate from San Francisco who had always treated her as an equal. Their mission was to swim underwater for nearly a mile, locate a mock target on the sea floor, attach simulated explosives, and return to the starting point. The exercise had to be completed within strict time limits and without surfacing except in genuine emergencies. 20 minutes into the dive, Chen's regulator malfunctioned, cutting off his air supply. In the murky water of San Diego Bay, this kind of equipment failure could quickly become life-threatening. Chen signaled frantically to Sarah, indicating his problem. Without hesitation, Sarah moved close to Chen and began buddy breathing, sharing her air supply while they continued toward their objective. Buddy breathing required precise coordination and timing. Sarah had to alternate between breathing herself and passing the regulator to Chen, all while maintaining their underwater navigation and forward progress. The exercise that should have taken 40 minutes stretched to over an hour as they dealt with the equipment failure. Sarah's air supply, meant for one person, was running dangerously low by the time they reached their target. She had to make a critical decision: surface and fail the exercise, or continue with the mission despite the risk. She chose to continue. Working quickly and efficiently, she attached the simulated explosives to the target while Chen provided security and navigation support. By the time they began their return journey, Sarah's air gauge was reading nearly empty. The swim back to the starting point was a test of nerve and skill. Sarah had to manage her remaining air carefully, taking the minimum breaths necessary while sharing with Chen. Twice during the return journey, she had to fight off panic as her air supply dwindled to almost nothing. They surfaced just yards from the beach, both gasping and exhausted but successful. The exercise cadre was waiting for them, having monitored their progress through underwater tracking equipment. "Explain the delay," ordered Chief Rodriguez. Chen started to speak, but Sarah cut him off. "Equipment malfunction, Chief. We handled it and completed the mission." Rodriguez nodded slowly. He'd watched the entire exercise through underwater cameras and knew exactly what had happened. Sarah had not only saved her dive buddy's life, but had completed the mission under circumstances that would have justified an abort. Her decision-making under pressure had been flawless. That evening, several of Sarah's classmates approached her to express their admiration for her performance. Even some who had been skeptical of her abilities were beginning to acknowledge that she belonged in their ranks. "That was some serious diving today," said Rodriguez, the candidate, not the instructor, as they cleaned their equipment. "I don't think I would have had the guts to continue the mission with that little air left." Sarah looked up from the regulator. She was disassembling. "It wasn't about guts," she replied. "It was about the mission. We were given a job to do, and we did it." The academic portions of second phase were intensive, covering underwater physics, decompression theory, and advanced navigation techniques. Sarah excelled in these areas, her analytical mind quickly grasping complex concepts that other candidates struggled with. She found herself helping classmates understand diving tables and decompression calculations during evening study sessions. But the real test of second phase came during the final exercise, a complex underwater infiltration scenario that combined all the skills learned during the previous weeks. Teams of 4 candidates had to infiltrate a simulated enemy harbor, attach charges to multiple targets, and extract without being detected. Sarah's team consisted of herself, Chen, Peterson, who had recovered from his Hell Week injuries, and a new candidate named Jackson who had joined their class after recovering from a training injury in a previous class. The team dynamics were good, with each member bringing different strengths to the group. The infiltration began at 200 hours from a point nearly 2 miles offshore. The team had to swim underwater to the target area, avoiding simulated enemy patrols and electronic detection systems. Sarah was designated as the primary navigator, responsible for getting the team to the correct location using only compass headings and dead reckoning. The water was particularly murky that night, with visibility limited to just a few feet. Sarah had to rely entirely on her compass and timing, counting fin kicks to estimate distance traveled. One mistake in navigation could doom the entire mission. 40 minutes into the swim, Sarah's calculations told her they should be approaching the harbor entrance. She signaled for the team to pause while she got a precise bearing. Using a waterproof compass and timing the intervals between passing boat engines, she was able to determine their exact position. They were slightly off course, but close enough to adjust. Sarah led the team through a series of course corrections, threading between simulated minefields and patrol areas. Her navigation was so precise that they arrived at their first target within minutes of their planned schedule. The targets were underwater obstacles designed to simulate ship hulls and pier supports. Each team member had to attach simulated explosive charges while remaining undetected by surface observers. The charges had to be placed in specific locations and armed with precise timing sequences. Sarah's target was the most challenging: a simulated submarine hull in 20 feet of water, directly beneath a heavily patrolled pier. She had to approach, from below attach her charge, and arm it without being spotted by the role-playing sentries above. The approach required perfect buoyancy control and precise timing. Sarah waited for nearly 10 minutes, timing the sentry patrols until she identified a gap in their coverage. When the moment came, she moved swiftly and silently, attaching her charge and arming the timer in less than 90 seconds. All 4 team members successfully placed their charges and regrouped at the extraction point. But as they prepared to begin their long swim back to safety, alarms began sounding throughout the simulated enemy base. Their infiltration had been detected, and enemy divers were being deployed to hunt them down. What followed was a deadly game of underwater hide-and-seek. Sarah's team had to evade the searching enemy divers while making their way to the extraction point. They couldn't surface without being spotted, and they couldn't use their lights without revealing their position. Sarah made the decision to split the team into pairs, reasoning that smaller groups would be harder to detect and could take different routes to the extraction point. She paired with Chen while Peterson and Jackson formed the second pair. They agreed to rendezvous at the extraction point in exactly 1 hour. The evasion required every skill Sarah had learned during her months of training. She and Chen moved through the dark water like ghosts, using natural cover and careful timing to avoid the searching enemy divers. Twice, they had to freeze in place as searchlights swept the water above them, waiting motionless until the danger passed. 30 minutes into their evasion, Sarah's air supply began running low again. The stress of the situation and the extended underwater time were taking their toll. She had to make her breathing as efficient as possible while maintaining the precise buoyancy control needed to avoid detection. As they approached the extraction point, Sarah could see lights from the enemy search teams converging on the area. Peterson and Jackson were already there, hiding in the shadows beneath a rocky outcropping. But the enemy divers were getting closer, and it was only a matter of minutes before the extraction point would be compromised. Sarah made a split-second decision that would later be used as a textbook example of tactical thinking under pressure. Instead of waiting for the scheduled extraction time, she signaled for immediate emergency extraction. Using hand signals, She communicated her plan to the other team members. The team would surface simultaneously at 4 different points around the extraction zone, creating confusion and making it impossible for the enemy forces to capture all of them. It was a high-risk strategy that required perfect timing and coordination. On Sarah's signal, all 4 team members surfaced at once, approximately 50 meters apart. The enemy forces, caught off guard by the sudden appearance of multiple targets, were unable to respond effectively. In the confusion, all 4 team members successfully reached the extraction vessel. The exercise cadre was impressed by Sarah's tactical decision-making and leadership under pressure. Her willingness to adapt the plan based on changing circumstances showed the kind of flexible thinking that made effective special operations personnel. Chief Rodriguez pulled her aside after the debrief. "That was good thinking out there, Martinez. Quick decision, well executed. That's the kind of leadership we're looking for in our operators." As second phase drew to a close, Sarah had not only survived, but had established herself as one of the top performers in her class. Her technical diving skills were excellent, her navigation abilities were exceptional, and her leadership qualities were becoming apparent to both instructors and fellow candidates. The graduation ceremony for second phase was small but significant. Of the 38 candidates who had survived Hell Week, only 26 remained. The attrition had been steady but ruthless, with candidates eliminated for everything from medical issues to performance failures to simple lack of motivation. Sarah stood with her remaining classmates as Chief Rodriguez addressed the group. "You've completed the diving phase of Bud S training," he announced. "You've proven that you can operate effectively in the underwater environment that is crucial to SEAL operations. But don't let success go to your head. Third phase is waiting for you, and it will test everything you think you know about combat and tactical operations." Third phase would focus on land warfare, weapons training, and advanced tactical operations. It was where candidates learned to think and operate like actual SEALs, where the academic knowledge and physical skills were integrated into practical combat applications. But third phase also had a reputation for being where the most promising candidates sometimes fell short. The standards were not just about physical performance or technical skills. They were about judgment, leadership, and the ability to make life and death decisions under extreme pressure. Sarah spent her brief break between phases reflecting on how much she'd changed since arriving at Coronado months earlier. The young woman who had walked into that Navy recruitment office in Houston seemed like a different person. She'd proven to herself and others that she could meet every physical and technical standard required of a SEAL candidate. But she also knew that the most challenging test was still ahead. Third phase would determine not just whether she could become a SEAL, but whether she could become the kind of SEAL who could be trusted with the most critical and dangerous missions. As she prepared for the final phase of her training, Sarah thought about all the people who had doubted her along the way. All the times she'd been told that women didn't belong in special operations. All the obstacles that had been placed in her path. She'd overcome every challenge so far through determination, skill, and refusal to accept limitations that others tried to impose on her. But she knew that third phase would test her in ways that no previous training had. It would require not just physical and technical competence, but the kind of tactical thinking and leadership ability that separated true warriors from everyone else. The young woman who had learned to shoot from her grandfather, who had outperformed her male peers in basic training, who had survived Hell Week and excelled in underwater operations, was ready for whatever came next. She'd proven that she belonged. Here and now she was determined to prove that she could excel at the highest levels of military service. Third phase would be her final opportunity to achieve the dream that had brought her to Coronado. Everything she'd worked for, sacrificed for, and endured for would come down to the next few months of training. She was ready. Third phase of Bud S. Training began with a sobering reminder of what was at stake. The 26 remaining candidates gathered in a classroom where the walls were covered with photographs of SEALs who had died in combat operations around the world. These weren't training exercises or academic discussions anymore. They were learning skills that would soon be applied in real-world life and death situations. Instructor Master Chief Patterson, a veteran of multiple combat deployments, addressed the class with quiet intensity that was somehow more intimidating than all. The shouting they'd endured in previous phases. Everything you've learned up to this point has been preparation, he began. Physical fitness, diving skills, mental toughness, those are just the prerequisites. Now we're going to teach you how to fight, how to think tactically, and how to make decisions that will keep your teammates alive and accomplish your missions. The weapons training in third phase was unlike anything Sarah had experienced. Despite her extensive shooting background, SEAL weapon systems were sophisticated and varied, ranging from precision sniper rifles to close-quarters combat weapons to explosive devices. But more importantly, candidates had to learn to use these weapons effectively in dynamic, high-stress situations. Sarah's marksmanship skills, which had impressed instructors throughout her training, became even more valuable in third phase. The shooting standards were extraordinarily demanding, requiring precision accuracy under conditions that simulated real combat stress. Candidates had to engage targets after physical exertion, while wearing full combat gear, and often while being subjected to distractions and time pressure. During one particularly challenging exercise, candidates had to complete a grueling obstacle course that left them physically exhausted and mentally drained, then immediately transitioned to a precision shooting test with multiple weapon systems. Most candidates saw their accuracy decline significantly as fatigue set in, but Sarah's scores remained consistently high. Master Chief Patterson observed her performance carefully. Sarah's breathing control, stance, and trigger discipline remained textbook perfect even when she was physically exhausted. Her grandfather's early training had instilled habits that held up under the most demanding conditions. "Martinez," Patterson called after one shooting session. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that under stress?" "My grandfather started teaching me when I was 8, Sarah replied, cleaning her rifle with practiced efficiency. "He always said that if you're going to carry a weapon, you better be able to use it when everything goes wrong." Patterson nodded approvingly. "He taught you. Well, maintain that standard." The tactical exercises in third phase were complex scenarios designed to test decision-making, leadership, and teamwork under simulated combat conditions. Teams had to plan and execute missions involving reconnaissance, direct action, and special reconnaissance operations. Each exercise was followed by detailed debriefs where every decision was analyzed and criticized. Sarah found herself naturally taking on leadership roles during these exercises. Her analytical mind quickly grasped the tactical principles being taught, and she had an intuitive understanding of how to apply them in dynamic situations. More importantly, she'd earned the respect of her teammates through her consistent performance and willingness to support others. During one exercise involving a simulated hostage rescue, Sarah was designated as the team leader for her 4-person squad. The scenario was complex. They had to infiltrate a building, neutralize multiple hostile forces, and extract hostages without causing civilian casualties. The exercise was designed to test judgment under pressure, as there were no perfect solutions and every decision involved calculated risks. Sarah spent considerable time planning the operation, analyzing the building layout, studying intelligence reports, and coordinating with her team members. She assigned roles based on each person's strengths and developed contingency plans for various scenarios that might develop during the mission. When the exercise began, everything immediately went wrong. The intelligence was faulty, the building layout was different than expected, and hostile forces were positioned in unexpected locations. Sarah had to adapt her plan in real time while maintaining effective command and control of her team. "Contact front," reported Chen, who was serving as point man. "Multiple hostiles, second-floor landing." Sarah quickly assessed the situation. The original plan called for a stealthy approach, but that was no longer possible. She made the decision to shift to a more aggressive assault, using speed and violence of action to overcome the enemy's advantages. "Switch to assault formation," she ordered over the radio. "Jackson, you're breaching. Peterson, provide covering fire. Chen, you're with me on entry. Move." The team executed the modified plan flawlessly, with each member understanding their role and adapting to the changing situation. They successfully neutralized the hostile forces and secured the hostages within the required time limit. More importantly, they demonstrated the kind of tactical flexibility and teamwork that would be essential in real-world operations. During the debrief, Master Chief Patterson focused on Sarah's leadership decisions. "Explain your decision to abandon the stealth approach," he ordered. "The stealth plan required conditions that no longer existed," Sarah replied confidently. "Maintaining a plan that was no longer viable would have endangered my team and jeopardized the mission. The assault approach played to our strengths and neutralized the enemy's advantages." Patterson nodded. "Correct. A good plan executed aggressively is better than a perfect plan that can't be implemented. You showed good tactical judgment under pressure." The demolitions training was where Sarah faced one of her most significant challenges. Working with explosives required a different kind of precision than marksmanship. There was no margin for error, and mistakes could be fatal. The training covered everything from basic charges to complex underwater demolitions to precision breaching operations. Sarah approached demolitions training with the same methodical attention to detail that had served her well in other areas. She studied the technical manuals extensively, practiced the procedures repeatedly, and asked detailed questions about every aspect of explosive operations. Her instructors noticed her careful, systematic approach to handling dangerous materials. During one training exercise involving underwater demolitions, Sarah's team was tasked with destroying a simulated enemy bridge while avoiding detection by security forces. The operation required precise placement of charges, careful timing of detonations, and coordinated extraction under difficult conditions. Sarah was responsible for calculating the explosive charges needed to ensure complete destruction of the target, while minimizing collateral damage to surrounding structures. The calculations were complex, involving factors like water depth, current, conditions, and the structural characteristics of the target. She spent hours reviewing the technical data and consulting with the demolitions instructors to ensure her calculations were correct. When the exercise began, her charges performed exactly as planned, completely destroying the target with minimal, unnecessary damage. "Textbook demolitions work," commented Instructor Rodriguez during the debrief. "Precise calculations, proper placement, perfect execution. That's how it's done." As third phase progressed, the exercises became increasingly complex and realistic. Candidates faced multi-day operations that tested their ability to sustain performance over extended periods while dealing with fatigue, stress, and constantly changing conditions. Sleep deprivation, limited food, and harsh weather conditions were all part of the training environment. During one particularly challenging exercise, Sarah's team was inserted by boat several miles offshore and given a mission that required them to conduct reconnaissance on a simulated enemy facility, gather intelligence on enemy activities, and extract without being detected. The exercise was scheduled to last 72 hours and included multiple contingencies designed to test their adaptability. 24 hours into the mission, Sarah's team encountered a problem that wasn't part of the planned exercise. One of her teammates, Jackson, developed signs of serious illness that could indicate appendicitis or another medical emergency. The team was miles from immediate medical support, and calling for emergency extraction would mean failing the exercise. Sarah faced a decision that had no good options: continue the mission and risk Jackson's health, or abort and fail the exercise. That could determine whether she graduated from BUDS training. She made the only decision consistent with SEAL values. Her teammates' safety came first. "Base, this is Team 4, she radioed. "We have a potential medical emergency and are requesting immediate extraction." The extraction took several hours to coordinate, during which Sarah provided first aid and monitored Jackson's condition. It turned out he was suffering from severe food poisoning rather than appendicitis, but Sarah's decision to prioritize his safety over mission success was exactly what the instructors hoped to see. Master Chief Patterson addressed Sarah privately after the incident. "You made the right call," he told her. "Mission success is important, but taking care of your people is more important. That's the kind of judgment we need in our operators." The final exercise of third phase was a comprehensive test that combined all the skills learned during BUDS training. Teams had to plan and execute a complex multi-phase operation that included infiltration, reconnaissance, direct action, and extraction components. The exercise lasted a week and was designed to simulate the kind of real-world missions that SEALs might face in combat. Sarah was selected as the overall mission commander for her class's final exercise, a responsibility that recognized her demonstrated leadership abilities and tactical competence. She would be responsible for coordinating multiple teams, managing complex logistics, and ensuring mission success while maintaining operational security. The mission scenario involved infiltrating an enemy-controlled area, gathering intelligence on hostile activities, and conducting a direct action raid to eliminate high-value targets. The operation required coordination between water-based and land-based elements, precise timing, and the ability to adapt to changing conditions. Sarah spent days developing the operational plan, coordinating with instructors who played the roles of intelligence analysts in higher headquarters, and briefing her teams on their respective responsibilities. The planning process was as important as the execution, requiring attention to countless details that could mean the difference between success and failure. When the operation began, Sarah demonstrated the leadership skills and tactical competence that had been developing throughout her training. She maintained effective command and control, made sound decisions under pressure, and successfully adapted to unexpected developments during the mission. All phases of the operation were executed successfully, with objectives accomplished and all personnel safely extracted. The exercise demonstrated that Sarah and her classmates had successfully internalized the skills and knowledge necessary to operate as effective SEAL team members. But the final test was still to come. The weapons qualification exercise that would either validate all her training or end her SEAL dreams was scheduled for the following week. The final weapons qualification was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in late spring. Sarah had been through countless shooting exercises during her months at Budas, but this one was different. This was the test that would determine whether she officially graduated from SEAL training and earned the right to wear the coveted Navy SEAL trident. The night before the qualification, Sarah lay in her bunk thinking about the journey that had brought her to this point. 18 months earlier, she'd been a young woman from Texas with a dream that everyone told her was impossible. Now, she was hours away from either achieving that dream or watching it slip away. The qualification course was designed to test every aspect of marksmanship that a SEAL might need in combat operations. Candidates had to demonstrate proficiency with multiple weapon systems, engage targets at various ranges under different conditions, and maintain accuracy standards that exceeded those required for any other military unit. Sarah arrived at the range before dawn, as was her habit. She liked to have time to prepare mentally and physically before important events, and this was the most important shooting test of her life. She checked and rechecked her equipment, ran through her pre-shooting routine, and visualized successful completion of each phase of the qualification. The other candidates began arriving as the sun came up. There were 19 of them left from the original class of 143 who had started Bud-S training months earlier. Each one had survived Hell Week, mastered the diving requirements of second phase, and demonstrated tactical competence in third phase, but none of that mattered if they couldn't meet the shooting standards. Master Chief Patterson gathered the candidates around him for the final briefing. Today's qualification will test your ability to engage targets accurately under realistic combat conditions, he announced. You'll shoot multiple weapon systems, engage targets at ranges from 7 yards to 600 yards, and complete courses of fire that simulate real-world tactical scenarios. He paused and looked around the group. The standards are non-negotiable. You either meet them or you don't graduate. There are no second chances and no makeup tests. This is it. The first phase of the qualification involved pistol shooting at close range, designed to test the accuracy and speed needed for close-quarters combat situations. Candidates had to engage multiple targets in specific sequences while moving and reloading under time pressure. Sarah stepped up to the firing line with the confidence that came from thousands of hours of practice. Her grandfather's early training, combined with months of intensive instruction at Bud-S, had prepared her for this moment. She drew her pistol smoothly and began engaging targets with the precision and speed that had become second nature. Her shots were flawless. Each target showed tight groupings in the high-scoring zones, and her times were well within the required limits. She completed the pistol phase with a perfect score, something that only a handful of candidates managed to achieve. The rifle phase was more complex, involving engagement of targets at multiple ranges while wearing full combat gear. Candidates had to demonstrate proficiency with both the M4 carbine and the Mk-18 close-quarters battle rifle, transitioning between weapons as required by the tactical scenarios. Sarah's performance with rifles was even more impressive than her pistol work. Her breathing control, trigger discipline, and position shooting were textbook perfect. More importantly, she maintained her accuracy even when fatigued from the physical demands of moving between firing positions while carrying heavy equipment. The long-range precision phase was where many candidates struggled. Engaging targets at distances beyond 400 yards required not just marksmanship skills but also knowledge of ballistics, wind reading, and environmental factors that could affect bullet trajectory. Sarah approached the precision rifle with the same methodical calm she'd shown throughout her training. She carefully studied the wind conditions, made precise adjustments to her scope, and calculated holdovers for the extended ranges. Her first shot at 600 yards struck dead center in the target's high-scoring zone. The instructors monitoring her performance exchanged glances. It was unusual for any candidate to hit their first shot at maximum range, and virtually unheard of for that shot to be a perfect center hit. Sarah continued to engage targets at various ranges, maintaining accuracy that impressed even the veteran instructors. "Outstanding shooting, Martinez," commented Master Chief Patterson as Sarah completed the precision phase. "Maintain that standard." The final phase of the qualification was the most challenging, a combat scenario that required candidates to engage multiple targets with different weapons while under stress and time pressure. The course was designed to simulate a real-world engagement where split-second decisions and perfect accuracy could mean the difference between mission success and failure. Sarah began the course with her usual calm confidence, but as she progressed through the various stations, she encountered a problem that threatened to derail her perfect performance. During a transition between firing positions, her rifle's scope became loose, causing her point of impact to shift significantly. A loose scope would normally mean automatic failure of the qualification. Candidates weren't allowed to make equipment repairs during the course, and shooting with defective equipment would make it impossible to meet the accuracy standards. But Sarah had been shooting long enough to recognize the problem immediately. Instead of panicking or trying to continue with defective equipment, she made a quick decision based on her extensive experience. She switched to using the rifle's backup iron sights, abandoning the scope entirely. Shooting with iron sights at the ranges required for SEAL qualification was exponentially more difficult than using a scope. Most candidates would have found it impossible to maintain the required accuracy. But Sarah had learned to shoot with iron sights before she ever used an optical sight, and her grandfather had insisted she maintain proficiency with both systems. She quickly adjusted her sight picture and continued engaging targets with iron sights only. Her accuracy remained virtually perfect, much to the amazement of the instructors watching her performance. She was compensating for the equipment failure through pure shooting skill, something they'd rarely seen in their years of conducting qualifications. The final station required engaging a series of targets at various ranges while moving between covered positions. It was the most realistic simulation of combat shooting, where candidates had to make quick decisions about target priority while maintaining accuracy under pressure. Sarah moved through the course like a seasoned combat veteran, identifying and engaging targets in the optimal sequence while using cover and concealment effectively. Her shooting remained flawless even while moving, and she completed the course well within the required time limits. When she finished the final station, there was unusual silence on the firing line. The instructors were reviewing her targets, confirming what they'd observed during the shooting. Her performance had been virtually perfect, despite the equipment failure that would have defeated most candidates. Master Chief Patterson approached Sarah as she was cleaning her weapons after the qualification. "Martinez," he said quietly. "In 20 years of conducting SEAL qualifications, I've never seen anyone maintain that level of accuracy after losing their optics. Where'd you learn to shoot iron sights like that?" Sarah looked up from the rifle she was cleaning. "My grandfather taught me that equipment fails, but fundamentals don't. He made me practice with iron sights until I could hit anything I could see clearly." Patterson nodded slowly. Your grandfather was a wise man. That performance today was exceptional. The results of the qualification were announced that afternoon. All 19 remaining candidates had passed the shooting requirements, but Sarah's scores were the highest ever recorded by a Bud-S candidate. Her performance had silenced any remaining doubts about her capabilities and established her as one of the most skilled marksmen in her class. But more importantly, her response to the equipment failure had demonstrated the kind of adaptability and problem-solving ability that defined effective special operations personnel. She hadn't just met the standards, she'd exceeded them while overcoming obstacles that would have defeated less prepared candidates. The graduation ceremony was held 2 weeks later on the beach, where Sarah's SEAL journey had begun months earlier. Family members, friends, and Navy officials gathered to witness the presentation of the SEAL Trident to the 19 candidates who had successfully completed the training. Sarah's grandfather had traveled from Texas to attend the ceremony, despite his age and failing health. As Sarah stood at attention while the trident was pinned to her uniform, she could see him in the audience, tears streaming down his weathered face. Master Chief Patterson read the citation that accompanied Sarah's graduation. For exceptional performance during basic underwater demolition, SEAL training, demonstrating the highest standards of physical fitness, technical competence, and leadership ability. Her response to adversity and commitment to mission accomplishment exemplify the finest traditions of naval special warfare. After the ceremony, Sarah's grandfather approached her, walking slowly but with obvious pride. "I knew you could do it," he said simply, embracing his granddaughter. "Your grandmother would be so proud." Sarah looked at the man who had started her on this path with childhood lessons about discipline and precision. "I couldn't have done it without what you taught me," she replied. "Every lesson, every principle you showed me, I used it all." Her grandfather smiled and touched the SEAL trident on her uniform. "This is just the beginning," he said. "The real work starts now." He was right. Graduating from Bud's training was only the first step in becoming a SEAL. Sarah would spend the next 18 months in advanced training, learning specialized skills like advanced combat medicine, language training, and mission-specific techniques. Then she would be assigned to a SEAL team where she would begin the real work of serving her country at the highest levels. But as Sarah Martinez stood on the beach at Coronado, wearing the SEAL trident that no woman had earned before her, she knew that she had proven something important to herself and the world. She had demonstrated that determination, skill, and refusal to accept artificial limitations could overcome any obstacle. The young woman who had walked into a Navy recruitment office in Texas had achieved what everyone said was impossible. She had earned her place among America's elite warriors through merit, dedication, and the kind of quiet competence that speaks louder than any words. Sarah Martinez had become a Navy SEAL, and her weapon had indeed shown the numbers that silenced all doubts about her belonging there. But more importantly, she had opened a door for others to follow, proving that excellence knows no gender and that America's finest warriors come in many forms. Her journey was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning.